Hello and welcome to City Beat. We are your central source of news and information for the city of Rocky Mount. I'm your host, Tamika Keenan Norman, and lately there's been a lot of discussion about a development project in our city center. And this proposed project would have new housing, a hotel, a parking garage, and retail space in downtown Rocky Mount. So we want to share all the facts. And coming up in just a moment, we're going to have Bridget Chisholm and Cedric Johnson, managing partners for BWC Consulting. So stay tuned for more of City Beat. We're going to talk about the economic impact of the project, as well as that parking garage and much more. You're watching City Beat.
Hey, you.
Yeah, you. Getting that college education? What are you gonna do? Graduate and take some office job? Be like everybody else?
Or will you dare do something different?
Like, be a teacher. You could be my teacher. You got the skills. The smarts.
Yes, you.
You could be the teacher I never forget.
That'd be cool.
Does that corporate job even have recess? What are you gonna make of yourself?
What are you gonna make of me?
Hello and welcome back to City Beat. As promised, we have with us today Cedric Johnson, also Bridget Chisholm of BWC Consulting, to talk about this proposed downtown development project. And just to give you a little insight, this project would include 60 units of mixed income residential housing, also a Tier 1 hotel, Spring Hill Suites Marriott, with up to 109 rooms, as well as 20,000 square feet of retail space and a 700 space parking garage. So thanks to both of you for being a part of City Beat today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and wanted you on the show definitely. You were recently here at a downtown revitalization panel meeting, so wanted to talk to you more. Some of the information you shared was really in layman's terms. We need that. But first, before we delve into the project, talk about what does BWC Consulting do? What are you all about?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Building Wealth and Communities Consulting is an economic development boutique consulting firm, and we advise our clients on strategy, just global strategy, like what to do, on financing strategy, and we really solve problems for our clients. And those clients tend to be higher ed institutions, units of local government, and some private developers.
Okay.
And we've been in existence for almost 15 years doing this space, and we have been working for the city of Rocky Mount since former manager Penny was manager, which has been 2011. We were one of his first consultants around economic development.
I knew you had been around for a while because I got here in 2012 and I can remember you from back then. But you know, this is a public-private partnership between the city and Hunt Services LLC. But what is your role, Cedric, with this particular project?
So BWC's role as an external consultant with the city was helping the city identify and understand how would you execute trying to attract private investment or private developer to the downtown area to spur, continue building upon the event center that recently came online, and it's experiencing a success and trying to ramp up growth in its performance. And so we, as the external consultant, has been working with the city manager and her office and team to bring that private investment to the downtown area to further activate the economic engine, that the potential that lies there. And so this is how that project, the proposed project, came about, with us understanding who was interested, who might be interested out in the marketplace, and what the city is looking to do with its downtown, and then making sure those parties came together to see if there was an opportunity to do this proposed project.
So Cedric, it's ironic you mentioned the event center because that was one of the first projects you worked on with the city, getting that off the ground, especially with those new market tax credits. But what are some other projects that you've worked on in this area?
Our very first project was doing the biotech project as part of Edgecombe Community College, which is expansion because they had a wait list for allied health. So we have been in the city and continue to support it grow and bring those, that's about $34 million in catalytic investment with using new market tax credits between the biotech and the event center, which, as you know, brought the specialty care clinic, and some enhancements to the event center with the family entertainment center to downtown Rocky Mount. So very long history of trying to include not only the dollars for investment into the city, but also ensuring that minority business enterprises are participating, as well as local enterprises, and then of course the jobs being created through construction and ongoing businesses here in the city.
So really, you've learned a tremendous amount about Rocky Mount. You've had to
Yes.
be able to do these projects.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And we continue to grow with the help of the, I believe it's the Phoenix Historic
Historical Society.
Yes, we have learned quite a bit also about the history of Edgecombe and Rocky Mount with the 1871 decision to move people from Edgecombe County to Nash County. So it started to give us some historical context as to what also is happening in, as you say, with our twin counties here and its impact on Rocky Mount. So yeah, it's been So we've been learning and now doing our homework and really just trying to understand the backdrop and how we can continue to build upon the public's commitment and then to continue to elevate this community.
Okay. And this proposed development's location would be across from the event center. And knowing your due diligence that you've done here, why is that location so important to the growth of Edgecombe County and to the area overall?
Right. So I mean, when you look at downtown Rocky Mount, like you see just a wealth of potential. And so when we look at the event center just within itself, it becomes very clear that just visually that some supporting amenities would be an ideal for a venue that attracts thousands and thousands of people each year. And so when you think about someone coming to the event center to experience what's inside, and then you come outside, it's like, well, where are the opportunities for them to have a full experience in regards to hospitality options, bring in more eatery options down, creating space for families to enjoy outside of the event center. And so that was part of thinking, our goal and objective in talking with the city was that there's how do you create shared prosperity and expand opportunity for residents of Rocky Mount while also attracting people from outside of the city to come and experience what Rocky Mount has to offer. And so this proposed mixed use development brings those supporting amenities that will create a destination per se for not only the event center but for downtown Rocky Mount, so that people can experience what Rocky Mount has to offer and help build forward here in the city.
Talk more to that shared prosperity too. I know you mentioned that at a previous meeting.
I'll answer that, and then I want to come back to what Cedric said. But shared prosperity, as certainly it's a technical definition is just equal in sharing. But one of the things that sometimes we see in these, whether it's public-private partnerships, is that it's usually maybe one group is winning, as opposed to, so in the sense it's an unequal prosperity. The developer who comes in with his private side, is perceived to be the person who is benefiting. And so what we wanted and what we saw with how this developer was approaching it is that yes, I might be building the 20,000 square foot retail center, but I want to use a owner rent combination, which is basically called a condominium type approach to development, where the business could actually own its space, and therefore you're building the asset base and the wealth base for that individual owner, because now he's not just renting, he's owning the space that he's built his business out of, which gives him more of a ownership and a stronger balance sheet as that particular owner looks to grow its business or go get financing. So it makes it better, and as most people know, like the dream of home ownership is being able to own your home. So being able to, if you have a condo, you own it. The same thing applies in the commercial space. You're owning your business and you're owning the location that you built your business out. You just haven't spent 20 years renting a facility that you don't own. And so, and since the developer's commitment is to have the commercial space, the retail, have local business owners, minority business owners, veteran business owners. That's an opportunity for those type businesses to be able to participate in everything that's going on downtown without necessarily having to go and buy, real estate and build, because maybe they don't have the capacity to do that, or that's what we mean by being able to share in the prosperity, because we're also now bringing tools to the table that make it advantageous for that, for the business owners.
Okay.
And
Is
the
that a
potential.
model that you see often?
Not in what you see in what we would call like a smaller secondary, tertiary markets. You see some of this in larger developments in more metro cities where that's kind of the structure of the transaction. Because obviously, like places like New York, San Francisco, the price of real estate is so high, so businesses just can't go out and buy real estate. But then, but you can own your share of the business in those condominiumized type developments. So we've seen that as part of a financing structure for other developers, but mostly in the metro environments, large metro.
And just to add to that, I think that there also has to be a willingness on the side of the developer to even create a model or structure for a project for that to happen. And
That's
that was what is unique about this developer with Hunt Services, is that his conversations from the very beginning with the city has been, how can I be a partner in pursuing, this, shared prosperity, but it's more inclusiveness and how you're going about doing your downtown revitalization. And so the fact that you didn't have to pull it out of a developer, he was actually proactive in having a conversation, made this a unique opportunity for Rocky Mount that we just necessarily don't see in a typical, developments of this type.
Right. And also because this truly is a private-public partnership, the city isn't having to, and the city didn't have to incentivize the developer to do anything extra. This is the developer bringing a solution based on what some of the managers' objectives are for downtown, and and council's objective, and the revitalizations board is for how can we have more people participate in what's going on, particularly since, as we all know, to do the event center, it took a 6-cent tax increase over time. So there's already quite a bit of public infusion to make the event center come to life. So as things grow and develop around it, you also want to make sure that the citizens have a chance to participate in it. So that's why it was very important, and we thought it was unique that the developer brought this, out, as opposed to being directed by the government to say, okay, well, we want you to do this.
Absolutely. And it ties in nicely because at our council retreat, Dr. Jim Johnson, I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yes.
He talks about inclusiveness and shared prosperity and all of that. So it ties in perfectly with that.
Yes.
I do want to go to that economic impact analysis.
Yes.
We were presented with in parking garage.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about how that deal would be structured. I know the city would, of course, have a lease on that for a little while. And then why is Hunt Services driving that particular effort?
Gotcha.
So the structure of I like to bifurcate the public-private partnership components. So the private piece of this structure is the developer bringing his own financing for the hotel, the retail, and the residential space. So that's around $33 million in private investment that is not being subsidized in any way, fashion, or form from the public side. The public side entails the garage, as you noticed, which is around almost $18 million. And the the way that it's conceived at this point between the city and the developer, which is still an ongoing process, is that the developer will actually build the parking deck on behalf of the city, and the cost of the garage would be the cost that the city would pay if it otherwise went out in the financial markets and secured the financing to build the parking garage. So the developer is saying, I will build the garage for you at the cost that you would have to pay to do it.
Right.
And at the end of 20 years, for the initial 20 years, the developer will operate and manage the garage. At the end of 20 years, the garage actually transfers over fully to the city that will own the garage and can do with it whatever it may. And so that's the structure. It allows the developer, basically takes on the responsibilities of going out into the capital markets and financing the garage, building the garage for the city, managing the garage and operating it for the first 20 years, and then transferring it over to the city at the end of the 20 years, which becomes a public asset fully owned by the city.
Right.
And Bridget can chime in about the impact and
Right. And I just wanted to add that this development is being done structurally under North Carolina statutes, public-private partnership statute, which means that, to Cedric's point, if the city is putting in $18 million of its public contribution, the developer has to at least meet that. It's got to be at a minimum of 50-50. So the developer must put in, well, he's putting in 33. By statute, it's got to be equal. So at least it's so the city's component of it has to always be matched by the developer, and the developer is completely so he's responsible for all the entire financing, as Cedric said, but his responsibility to ensure, quote, what happens if the private part went dark, the hotel went dark, which we've heard some of those questions. The city isn't jumping in to fix that because the developer, he's on the hook with the flag, whatever his financing, however much money he's put into it, to be responsible to ensure that that project is successful. And then, and to Cedric's point about how the developer has worked with the city and the city finance most of the time, and when we had a preliminary session with the local government commission, they were like, well, when you do these capital leases, because it is a capital lease, such that it's fully amortizing over 20 years, usually that lease is equal to the developer's cost of capital, which probably most would argue that is going to be more than a city of such good standing as Rocky Mount. So what the developer did and how this was structured with the city to show his integrity and to be fair is that he's like, I'm going to do it, whatever the lease payment would be, whatever our cost would be, is going to be at the city's cost of capital. And that's why you've seen Davenport, which is the city's financial advisors, run their numbers, ensure what would be the impact on the tax base, what if the city went out to finance an $18 million public garage, what would their principal and interest be? And that's how it ties to what the lease payment is. It's not what the developer wants to charge the city. It's directly tied to how the city would have financed this tax exempt and taxable financing for 20 years for that garage. So so there's no markup, or there's no incentive, for the developer to, make money on this or anything like that, because he's already he's already said, I'm going to do it at whatever my lease payment will be, whatever the city would do it at.
And this is what our role is as the external consultant to the city, is to ensure that things like this are understood and explicitly articulated in the agreement, so that there's an understanding of how the mechanics of such a structure would work. To your question of why the developer is taking on the responsibility of building the deck, is when, given that he's bringing a top tier 1 flag, hotel flag here to Rocky Mount, the hotel franchise brand requires that the developer has control over the
parking.
building of the parking to ensure the integrity of the quality of the deck. They just will not allow him to go and say someone else is going to build the deck, and whatever risk, we don't know the standards and how that
Right,
deck
that
is
makes
built.
sense.
And so for him to actually get the flag approved, he had to show that he would also be able to ensure that the quality of how the parking garage is built
Right.
is also in accordance with what the hotel flag or brand is requiring. And so that's when he came to the city and he made it clear that, he would need to be able to ensure that the parking deck is built in a certain way to certain specifications that would allow him to get the flag. Is why he has put the public-private partnership structure as him building the parking garage versus the city figuring out how it would build the parking garage.
Downtown parking is needed, and the more stuff you have going on, the more parking you need. But because of the way our parking is situated downtown, Marriott wanted to also be assured that there were the adequate spaces given the size property that they were approving. So it's not only the control of the specifications, but it's also, they knew the way it was currently set up and where it was proposed, there weren't enough spaces to get the flag, and they
Right.
require 140 spaces. And of the 700, it still works out. 80% of the garage space, 560 spaces, are for really the event center and the public space, the public uses. Now that we're going to have more amenities downtown, and then the 140 are for the hotel. And while the city doesn't own the garage during the 20 years, any excess profits inure to the city. So that's also part of the revenue stream that the city will be deriving from this this public-private investment that's coming downtown.
Okay. And is it 109 rooms?
It's between 107 and 110. So
Okay,
you're right.
okay,
They're as they're finalizing it, but it will be no less than 107. Right.
So that's ample parking.
And that will,
definitely.
right, and that's kind of their formula for how they came up with 140 spaces.
Right.
Right.
And this developer has taken on a lot of risk based on what you all are telling me.
Yeah, and we
Yes.
were looking at when this all started. He's been coming down to Rocky Mount since early April. Yeah, to just investigate, to talk. We just, and as Cedric said, our firm with the city, we serve as advisors, and because of our work across the country, we just made that connection based on some of the objectives that the manager shared with us around what she wanted to do during her tenure, as far as building upon the successes of the event center, but leaving just continue to improve. And so we knew from the SFA Sports Facilities Advisory's feasibility assessment that there would be a need for continued hotels, and as Cedric said, the reason we wanted it, we thought it would be great to have it adjacent to or in front of the event center, is because we've done another project in Birmingham, Alabama, where the city had made the same kind of investment, but there was no development around it. And when you go to book events, especially because this is the premise of the event center, was really around youth and amateur sports competitions.
Right.
People like amenities. They book amenities, and one of the things that we didn't know, but this we knew that it was going to grow room nights because that's what the advisory report said. But it's not cannibalizing what would be happening out at the perimeter. And when I said what we learned is that some of the potential bookings for the event center, as far as competition events, aren't booked if they're the same weekend that there's something going on the outdoor facility, because there's just not enough room nights. And even as you book you know, because I know that some people will argue, well, you're just taking money away or room nights away from Nash County, because this hotel would be on the Edgecombe side. And it's a both and. Both counties will grow, and as you know, now Edgecombe has agreed to allow the city of Rocky Mount to receive
Portion of the occupancy taxes.
right,
Yeah.
like 2 cents.
Okay.
So, and of course, that didn't mean much if you don't have any hotels. But if you start building hotels on the Edgecombe side, that starts to make a big difference for Rocky Mount and for Edgecombe.
And in line with that, what are some other economic impacts from this project, direct and indirect?
Right.
Right. So I like to say before I answer that, it's like success breeds success, right? And so that's what we've seen, which is why this is an exciting project that we saw the potential, and we've been championing because it makes sense, and of what it is putting in place for the next round of success for Rocky Mount. The city hired for an economic impact study to be completed to see what would be both the direct and the indirect impact from an economic standpoint of bringing this proposed project to downtown Rocky Mount. And what the results shows is what we anticipate to some degree, even better, is that over the construction of the project, that there's going to be around 1,000 jobs that are going to be created. 400 of those jobs, both directly from the hotel and the retail space, 400 of those jobs are going to be permanent jobs, so together with the direct and the indirect jobs, because more services are going to be needed to support the hotel, to support the business owners in the retail space. So that's success building on success. We're seeing that there's going to be a significant number of jobs created, as well as the report showed that over the initial 20 years of the project, that an additional, just at the local level, around $2 million just in incremental economic impact coming to Rocky Mount, in addition to the direct local tax revenue that's going to be generated. So when you think about a hotel and the retail and the residential, you have property taxes, local property taxes, that's a local revenue source. You have a local sales tax that's going to be generated from people spending money in these facilities. And so when you take all of that with the occupancy tax now that the city has put in place to share in, you're getting this incremental local tax revenue, and then the larger picture of that, you're inducing more economic activity, and then that we anticipate will drive more attention and attraction to more private capital coming into downtown Durham, and I'm from Durham, downtown Rocky Mount. And so, the court now that sets the table for city leaders and local stakeholders to say, well, how can we build upon this for the surrounding neighborhoods around the downtown area where there's opportunity for the benefit from the revitalization of downtown Rocky Mount, and how do we do that in a responsible way so that everyone can participate in what we're deliberately doing to the downtown area, so that shared prosperity is actually a result of our actions.
Yeah. And I think, and to that same report, the 1,000 jobs is about 100 million of just the construction impact, and then when you add the ongoing and direct and the induced numbers, it adds another 40 million. So it's a total of about $140 million economic impact based on what a third party, not Bridget said, didn't make it up.
Right.
You can go read the report. And the ongoing incremental tax revenues and collections that will continue in infinitum and will grow. And these are all projections that don't include any growth, because as you know, Davenport is very conservative. Novogradac was conservative, so they didn't even put growth projections on these numbers.
Right.
And I think it's very important to reiterate again, because this was a question and a concern of the council members, and point taken in that you have to be responsible stewards of public resources.
That's right.
Is that this project will not require any tax increase for the local residents in any form, fashion. And so just being able to bring a scaled up project like this to Rocky Mount and not have to require or even request, tax increases and the benefits that it is projected. Third-party objective assessments shows that, this is a great opportunity for Rocky Mount to bring something that otherwise, I'm not sure would have naturally come to, on its own fruition to this part of North Carolina, to be honest.
Now, are there other examples of these types of projects that the developer has done previously?
Yes, he's done these in the Southeast, in Tennessee, which is his home base, and so we see, we're like, we did our due diligence. The city's done their due diligence, but he's worked on these in Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee. But the ones that we have seen have been very, very successful, and is currently doing another mixed use in another small rural town of Tennessee. But it's, again, leveraging off of the hospital, strong economic engines, just like this is a strong economic engine. And that's really has been his success as a developer, is he is strongest and works in small we'll call it secondary and tertiary cities, which I think is unique, and also in that, he sought out Rocky Mount because he understands that market, and it's like, I see value in that.
And just in communications with the developer, it's his mind frame is, when he sees an opportunity, rather than thinking, what if it fails? His mindset is, what if this thing succeeds, right?
Exactly.
So you do all the due diligence and you get the go, and it makes sense for you, and you're putting your money in it.
That's right.
That was
At
unique.
risk.
He's a really interesting person, and getting you to understand, if you think about the upside, what can the upside mean, not just for this project, but for Rocky Mount and what it can do in building off of something that's proven as a success. So, have been able to partner with someone like that is all much
He's an
better.
optimist, which is a good thing.
He's an optimist, and he will quickly say a capitalist.
Yeah.
Like, when he runs his numbers, he will not do it if it's going to lose money. I mean, like, if he thought and if the numbers projected that it did not hit his internal rate of return thresholds, he would not have continued on. And so while people may be worried about if it's going to go dark, that risk is his. The risk of the additional cost of capital, because he's not the city of Rocky Mount, is his. So so when people and some of our the council members, since we work for the city, we just want them to make sure that they are educated on what really is at risk and who's at risk, and not get them commingled, because Cedric and I are very clear, the city of Rocky Mount has no risk and exposure for his private development. By statute, to construct the garage, the developer must have a payment and performance bond and provide a completion guarantee, and to put the package together for the local government commission. He also has to show evidence of his ability to finance the entire project. And so when we know he's working with top financial institutions on this, because it's very attractive, and they have to do their underwriting as well, so not divulging any of his private matters. But I just thought that it's just important to know that for this type of project, and the eyes and the scrutiny that is on it, not only from just the due diligence that the city has performed, Amy's team, the city managers, have performed, has been, top notch, and that's consistent with what you would have to put together when it goes to the local government commission. And it does have to go, because it's a capital lease, that won't be, quote, subject to appropriations. You do have to have local government commission's approval.
The last thing that I do want to touch on is LGC, because that's the last step. LGC approval for the financing.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Well, and to approve, to be precise, the city's 20-year commitment of the lease payment. So, because it's a guaranteed, and it's a capital lease. That's what the local government commission is approving, that capital lease, so that the city can enter into that agreement.
Okay. Now, what are some of the things that the LGC may look at for that?
Yeah, great question. They are requiring quite a comprehensive package, including, the city's acknowledged, sign off on the developer. They require the third-party economic impact study from Novogradac. They require, obviously, Davenport do an assessment as to the city's ability to enter into this project and how it impacts its key ratios as AA credit city. They required a independent cost review by a third party. They used New Banks to validate that, one, there was enough money to do the 700 space garage since the city will own it at the end, and two, what the cost range for that should be based on a third party.
Right.
Because, and in that capital lease, which I believe has been put out for public, the 30 days of public notice. Again, all this is part of a statutory process that the city has to follow, the developer has to follow.
And so I would just add to end that, one of the other points of consideration and concerns on both the council and from feedback we heard was, would this project crowd out, the ability of the city to meet other planned responsibilities, capital improvement projects, and the Davenport assessment of the city's, credit and, financing capacity and ability shows that even when including this proposed project, that the city will be able to fulfill its planned pipeline of projects and still have a little cushion in case it needs to address any other issues that may come up in the years ahead. And so just seeing how this project fits into the larger, strategic plan for the city, it is feasible and viable. And so, we're excited, and we've been in positions where we've had to tell our clients that a project is not a good go or whatnot. But for this one, it seems to be like almost a no-brainer from us, from an economic advisor, consultant standpoint, that this is something that could benefit the city of Rocky Mount tremendously.
Right. And I wanted to add on to the point that I was thinking about, is that also in that the capital lease as it's constructed, if the cost of the garage is also deemed to be lower, and that's what the third party advisor was looking at, the assessment, or when the actual dollars come in, if they come in lower than the 17.1, which is the garage cost, then there's a offset, and that capital lease amount would come down.
Okay.
So, again, trying to be clearly respectful of the city and the fact that 80% of its use is public. That it's a give and take, but that the benefits of if there are some savings, that it's also reflected in the capital lease payment would go down. So that, again, that our client, the city, isn't overpaying for the garage, and that what we think we have is the right amount of money to get that across the finish line is what typically what the local government commission, the LGC, would be looking to ensure this, and this is part of the city's due diligence as well.
Yeah.
Anything else you all want to add?
Bridge. Other than thank you for having us to share more about this project. It's been a process, and there's a lot of education. There's an education piece, and then there's the whole process of getting the execution of, so that the city is in proper position to move forward the project. But it's been great having the opportunity to be a part of something new.
Right. And I want to hit on a couple points that we did not hit on, but just and you described it in your what the project is, that have been important to the council members. Whether they support it or not, this part is important. One, that there continues to be minority business and local business participation. And I mentioned that this is under the P3 statute, and there is in that statute a minimum 10% best effort requirement, and the developer has agreed to exceed that number. And I know that will be something that's also in the redevelopment agreement, so that that is clear that on both the public side and the private side, there is a commitment to ensuring MBE spending, the jobs that are controlled by the developer also represent, local, the community, etc. And
that's what P3 is.
in our statutory requirement of P3, there is a minimum threshold for MBE participation.
Okay.
And that's 10% best efforts.
Okay.
And he's going to exceed that, but we wanted to make sure that that was clear, because also when you have a public component, yes, the city is paying the lease payment, but it's also important to ensure that in the creation of jobs, in the creation of the spending to get to that, get the project, built, is that we know that the developer is also clear that there's a requirement, and not only is he clear on it, he's wanting to exceed it, and it would be documented. And then I just wanted to touch on the fact that it is mixed income housing. We and I think Cedric and I said in the revitalization meeting is that it's not for one extreme or the other, whether it's all super high market rate or all affordable. We believe that the best way to ensure a diverse downtown and diverse ownership and the workers of all levels, including the workers coming from CSX, have that it's mixed income. And for that residential piece, we think that's important. So I just wanted to make sure that not only for the manager that we heard what her request was, but we also have heard from the council members as to what's really important for their communities to be able to participate. Again, part of this whole shared prosperity concept.
Exactly. And I don't remember if you touched on this, but with the residential piece, also condos and apartments, rent or purchase. So
that's right.
So that's good as well.
Yes.
But thank you all so much for being a part of the show today, and for really, really breaking this down and explaining it as well. That's very important. So thank you both for coming on the show today, Bridget and also Cedric from BWC Consulting. And thank you for tuning in as well. You can always log onto our website for some of those documents they talked about for site plan, economic impact analysis, and much more. Just visit RockyMountNC.gov. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of City Beat. I'm Tamika Keenan Norman.